Right, guys, Cody back again, dropping yet another video. This time, I'm very, very blessed and honoured to be joined by Rachel Williams, who is a domestic abuse survivor, who's a published author. She's also got a media profile, and she's also a domestic abuse activist as well, raising awareness through her experiences and stuff. Thank you for joining us, Rachel.
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
So Rachel, so you obviously, so had you suffered before? So before you met this just bully boy brute, had you suffered domestic violence before that?
No. I was a young mum. I was pregnant at 18. Had my oldest son at 19. With a guy called Ian. That didn't last long. He liked to go out on Friday, come on Sunday, go to the raves and everything else. And then I met Darren.
And Darren is this 6'7", 60-inch chest, just muscle on muscle. Just so what age did you meet him? Like where and what age was you?
So I was 21. Josh was 2 at the time, so obviously a single mum, and I met Darren through his sister who lived opposite me. So that's how I first met Darren. Charming guy, real funny. Like we said, a big guy. He was about 18 stone when I met him. He got to 22 in the end, 22 stone. He was a bodybuilder. In the gym 5 nights a week. Used to work on the door. Big guy.
Steroid use as well. Normally bodybuilding
steroids and all the anabolic steroids. You know, I could name quite a few of them they used to take. Used to get me to inject him as well with them.
Did he dig in his ass or his shoulder?
In the ass.
Both sides.
Yeah. And he was never anything else. Didn't take any other drugs. Wasn't a drinker. He was just on the steroids. Obviously pumping iron all the time. He used to go out hunting on the weekends with his working dogs, foxing, badger baiting. But yeah, that was only when I sort of knew him. Did he let me into his world then, so to speak.
So in the early days, like you went out on the first date and then you obviously developed a relationship. How soon in did you just realise that this guy is just, the anger started to show through?
So I always say to people, you know, if somebody slapped you on the first day, you wouldn't go back for a second. So with perpetrators of abuse, it's a drip process. So the significant moment for me when I realised he had much more than a bit of a short fuse was when I was 7 months pregnant with his child, and he lifted me off the floor by my throat and he let me go when my lips turned blue. And that was his words he later told me. But, you know, he fell to his knees then, cried like a baby, you know, said he would change, said he had anger issues. And 4 years prior to that, his brother had committed suicide. He was brought up in a violent household himself. And I just thought, do you know what? I'll help him. I can fix him. You know, obviously he hasn't had a normal upbringing, haven't had a normal life, and I'll just help to fix him.
And how soon after you got together had you fallen pregnant?
Quite quick. It was probably about 13, 14 months.
So literally in that first instance, it wasn't to run. It was like, you know what, it's a lapse. It's a momentary lapse of control. And just, you thought you could save him, sort of thing. Like you said, you sort of had sympathy for the fact he'd been in a violent upbringing, product of his environment. And then just, so from that one time, was it very short after where the next incident happened, or?
So I can't remember the next vivid moment. It was just, all I can remember now looking back was the control. Not that I saw it as control at the time. You know, when I had Jack give birth to our son Jack, he even started on me in the hospital just after I'd given birth, telling me, because my mum come to see me, and she said, "Oh, he's gorgeous. You know, he looks like Josh, my oldest boy." And when my mother left, he goes, "What do you effing mean? He looks like Josh." No, he fucking don't look like Josh. Goes, he looks like Jack. We're gonna call him Jack. He said, don't look nothing like him, as if Josh, my oldest son, you know, is some sort of freak or something. And then I can remember being at the window with Jack in my arms in the hospital in the maternity wing, and watching him go to the car park, and I waved, and he turned around and stuck his 2 fingers up to me. And it was then, it was just like, wow, this is something else. You know, I wasn't expecting to be treated like this just after having a baby. But then he came up the next day with flowers, and he was nice.
He literally sounds like a Jekyll and Hyde character. Like you said, it literally sounds like the moments of anger, and then it's like repent, repent, repent. But then it's not a real repent. It's because he wanted to keep hold of you. Thing is, what I've learned with like a lot of people I've spoken to that have gone through domestic abuse is very early on, the jealousy, the possessiveness, isolating your friends and family, sort of become self-reliant on them. They call you every name under the sun. It's just literally assassinating your self-esteem, your self-confidence. And looking back now, did you obviously at the time you didn't see it, but looking back, was it starting very early on with that sort of
now when I look at it, Cody, I can see it so clear. You know, he stopped me going out with my friends. One incident that I can remember before I fell pregnant for Jack was when I'd gone to my friend's 21st birthday barbecue, and Darren came along, and she was talking about an ex-boyfriend of mine. And when we were walking through the park on the way home, it was like about, I don't know, 12 o'clock midnight. So the only thing that was lighting the path was the moonlight. And he said, oh, what's this about this freaking boy? And he mentioned his name, and I said, oh, hang on a minute. I said, and I'd had a few to drink. I said, it's none of your business. And the next thing then, I can remember tumbling down a bank and landing head first in a load of stingies. So I put my hand up, expecting to be yanked up, and he was off. He'd gone. He was walking, you know, at a fast pace and left me. And I thought, did I just fall? Was I pushed? Did I trip over something? And because I'd had a drink, I wasn't quite certain. And then the following day then, he came to the house and was crying and apologized and said, yeah, I got jealous. You know, I'm really sorry. I just really think that I love you, and I just got jealous. You know, and being young like that, Cody, as well, when you've got nothing else to compare your relationship with, it's really hard because you don't know what a normal relationship is like. And I think, you know, as you get old, you realize you have ups and downs in your relationship, and you do have arguments. But I mean, when you're with an abuser, sadly, when it's a drip feed process, that becomes your normal relationship, and you don't know any different. But there was, you know, looking back now, it was subtle things, you know, like I could drive before I met him, but I didn't have a car. And I can remember going out with Jack in a pushchair and pushing him along one of the main roads, and all of a sudden Darren comes screeching up in his car. What are you fucking doing out here? He goes, what are you doing walking up town like this? And I'm like, what are you on about? I'm going shopping. And then what happened then, he bought me a car, because then he said he didn't want his reason at the time he bought me a car was, one, he didn't want to see me struggling with shopping bags and getting soaking wet if it was raining. But it wasn't. It was because he didn't want guys looking at me in their vans going past. You know, and another incident that I can remember, you know, over the years, this was into the relationship. I can remember taking Josh to school, and I'd gone in the car, and Jack was a baby, and he was in the car seat. And I thought, as I left the house, there was the councilmen cutting the grass, and they were opposite. So I was like, oh great, I hope they're not going to be on my side when I get back. And all these things are just going on in your head, and you're thinking, right, if this happens, I'll do this. You know, if they say anything, I'll do this. So as I come back from the school, as I pulled up, lo and behold, these guys were all sat on the steps leading down to my house having a fag. And I'm thinking, oh, so I literally got the car and give them the most stinkingest look. I mean, they might not have said anything anyway. They might have just said good morning, whatever. and got in the house. And as I come down the steps to go into the house, I could see Darren behind the net curtain. And as I came in the house, I said, what, knowing damn well what he was doing. I said, what are you doing there? He said, I was just waiting for him to say something. He said, because I'm telling you now, the one in the grey top would have had it first. And then he was pointing out which ones would have had it. And that was before anything had happened. But I got myself prepared because I knew what he would do if they had said something. It was subtle over the years. But then once you're in it, you're drowned in.
It sounded like you would have had more freedom if you would have been in prison, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely, I would have. Absolutely. You know, being a hairdresser, you know, I couldn't even cut a man's hair. And he would make regular appearances to the salon and check the appointment book to try and catch me out. And there was one instance, and if you Google Rachel Williams' employer's letter, my employer wrote this letter for something that I was doing with domestic abuse. And she said, you know, she'd employed me from 1999 to 2002, and my work was great. She was happy with my work, but my employment didn't come without problems. But Darren controlled my work in life. I wasn't allowed to cut men's hair. We had to lead him to believe that the male trainee guy in there was gay, because otherwise he'd have gone absolutely berserk. And she said, you know, they were all fearful of him kicking off. And one time I was the only stylist free to cut this guy. A guy had come in for a haircut. So my boss, Fran, had to order all the trainees to circle around me while I cut this guy's hair so it wasn't visible back from the street. You know, how crazy is that when you think about it? When I'm saying it, it sounds absolutely crazy. You know,
did you lose a job as well because of this, because of that sort of behaviour?
I didn't lose my job because thankfully Fran, she knew the family, she knew Darren, so she just sort of put up with it. And I think had she have sacked me or told me I had to go, and then I'd had to said to Darren, "Oh, I've lost my job," then he would have kicked off even more, and all the windows would have been put through.
So who was nearest to you that saw the change in you, the way you was dressing? You might have been covering up bruises. Who was it that was nearest to you earliest on that was like something, they either took a dislike to him, or they spoke to you on the side, or to say, look, there's something?
Nobody ever spoke to me on the side. Cody. I think the thing is, because Darren was a force to be reckoned with, and he was feared by the police, you know, like you know, I said to you before, the CID coming up the house, and then them putting their foot inside the house, and him telling them to get their foot out of the house or effing bury him in the bank, and they done it. So, you know, he was known. He's known in the area. You know, he was a hired gunman. He worked on the doors. He used to knock people out, chuck them down flights of stairs. So the only person really that knew a glimpse of my environment and what I was living in was probably my sister, and she witnessed things. You know, when we had a burger van, my sister used to work on a burger van. We had a catering trailer, and one day I was late bringing the bread rolls by literally 5 minutes, which wasn't my doing. It was because as I came into the dock where our burger van was positioned, there was a train track, and if the train's coming with all the cargo on, you can't get in. So I couldn't get in. I had to wait for the train to pass. And as I pulled up at the burger van, I could see him there, and I could see the look on his face, and I thought, shit, I'm late. And as I got out of the car with all the bread rolls, he come behind and he flipped them all up in the air, and then gripped me by the throat and held me at the back of the burger van. There was a guy, a dock worker, who witnessed it, and he said to my sister, "I will never come and eat you again. That man's an animal." And then he walked off. And then with that, I was trying to get Darren's hands from my throat. My sister was like saying, I'm off. I'm not even working on you anymore. And with that, he picked up a huge generator, which generated the, and he threw it like it was a box of crisps. And it was like, you know, what could you do? And I knew if, you know, when I had to get out of it, if I could ever get out of it, you know, I used to pray that he'd have an heart attack, you know, that it is going to be down to me. There was nobody's going to be helping me now, because like I said, even the police were scared of him.
Wow. What was his relationship like with your parents and stuff like?
My mother hated him. My mother absolutely loathed him. And that
From
was
early on. From early on, she just
yeah,
knew.
yeah. From early on, I think she didn't know the extent of it, but she knew he wasn't a very nice guy. And he never used to come to my mum's house. Thankfully, that was a bit of solace because I'd go to my mum's house and be up there for hours. He'd be in the gym, so that was really lovely, you know, to go up there. But he never sort of isolated me from my family, but certainly from friends. You know, friends used to ask me to go out, and I'd always make excuses. Oh no, I can't stick it uptown. You know, I don't want to go uptown. Blah blah blah. And Darren used to say to me, "No, you need to be staying in because all the men want to do uptown is shag you and shag women like you." And then he would say to me that all the girls uptown are slags. They're like Easter eggs. You take off the wrapper and it's plain chocolate underneath. This is his words. But yeah, all the time he was working the door and all the time he was cheating on me.
One rule for one and one rule for another.
Yeah.
And it's like the one thing that, like, obviously I know that you've, obviously, as we move on, like further on in the conversation later on, I know that you've come into contact with Sally Challen as well and David Challen and
yeah,
the work that you've done as well. But like with this, because this, like I said, it wasn't like a couple of instances. It was 18 bloody years, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was like I said, I probably could have killed him and gone to prison and been out sooner, you know. And don't get me wrong, Cody, I did used to think, you know, could I do it, you know? And only a couple of times over the years I phoned the police, and one time I can remember him coming to attack me, and I had a huge hunting knife that I'd taken out of his drawer, and he was coming towards me and kept pressing it and pressing his chest into it, or his stomach rather, into the knife, and saying, "Go on, do it." You know, obviously I'm not, because I haven't got it in me to do it. You know, but it was showing me again, you know, you've got no power.
Did you ever fantasize about killing him? Dream or fantasize about actually just in a dream or a nightmare where you just like, I've done it, sort of thing?
And he used to suffer with sleep apnea, so he'd stop breathing, and I used to be like, "Oh Lord, don't let him breathe again now. You know, let this be the time that he don't take another breath." And then and then launch himself up in bed and then breathe, and I'd be like, you know. And, you know, women who are watching this, you know, will absolutely totally relate to what I'm saying now, because, you know, when you're in that and you think that is the only way out, is they've got to die or you're going to die, that's your options.
What was his relationship like with the kids? Because obviously he couldn't control his temper, but were the kids just fearful of him? Did they witness anything? Did they?
They did witness some of it. But for my youngest son, Jack, he always used to say, and Jack used to torment him. And he, you know, Jack was the apple of his eye. And he never ever hit the kids or anything like that. And Jack used to say, "I'm the grown up, you're the kid." Because he used to say things to him like, "What do you think, Jack? Mama had a boyfriend before she met me. Isn't that disgusting?" And Jack used to say,
why would you speak to a child like that?
Yeah, exactly. And he used to say to him, "Dad," because he never called him Dad. He used to call him Dad. Dad. He goes, "That was before Mama was even with you. Why would you even think about that?" "Yeah, but it's bad, and she should have waited for me, shouldn't she?" And he'd be like, looking at it, you know, and Jack, you know, proper clued up and everything. And he used to look at him and shake his head as if to say, "You're something else."
And I know you said he was also, Darren was fascinated with the craze, and I think you said he took you to a graveyard to go and visit Reg or Ronnie or Charlie's grave.
All the family, Cody. You know, Chingford Mount Cemetery. That's where the Crays are buried. Charlie, Ron, Reg, Violet, and Francis. And that he said, "I'm going to take you, you know, for a day out." And I'm like, "Where are we going?" And it was like Chingford Mount Cemetery. I said, "Well, what are we going to a cemetery for?" "Go see Ron and Reg." And he even had ferrets, and he called them Ron and Reg.
Wow, it's just this guy just sounded. Would you say, from what, like you said before when we spoke before we came on live, you were saying like he used to throw live cats to the dogs to bring them up and stuff and bring them on. It literally sounds like it's well documented that people that hurt animals from a young age go on to psychopathic tendencies or psychopathic behavior. Was he ever diagnosed or anything like that, or was it just?
He was never diagnosed as psychotic until the Judge Rinder show, which was aired yesterday, and Professor Jane Monckton Smith, who's a criminologist, and she wrote the 8-stage timeline for the homicide for domestic violence. And obviously I was at stage 9 because I shouldn't be here. 8 is death. And she diagnosed him as a psychopath. And I found out when he was a boy, he used to put straws at frogs and blow them up. Use of fox, like I said, fox hunt and badger bait. And I can remember one incident with the cat. And I'd gone out the garden, I could hear a cat crying. And as a kid, I had a cat and I love cats. And I can hear this cat crying and I was thinking, where the hell's that? And I could hear it as if it was trapped somewhere. And as I opened the gate to go down to the other part of our garden, which you couldn't see where the dog kennels were, there was a cage to the right and there was a cat in there. So I'd run back up the stairs and Darren was in bed. And I said, you better get down here now. There's a cat caught in the cage, oblivious to he'd set a trap for this cat. So anyway, he jumped up and he always had like walking around in just like budgie smuggler flipping pants. And he'd come down the stairs and I said, you're going to go and let it out. Wait, no, don't let it out down that end because of the dogs. He goes, get back in the fucking house. So I just knew then, Cody, I just knew what was happening. So I just ran in the house, slammed the back door, shut the windows, and I just turned the telly up loud because I knew exactly what he was doing. And
that could have been a neighbour's cat. Could have been a neighbour's cat. Could have been a stray cat.
It probably was a neighbour's cat because there was lots of cats there. And what he'd done is he turned the radio up in the kennels and chucked the cat in there. Yeah. And then people say, you know, things like, ask you, well, why didn't you leave? You are just surviving, and I say they're domestic terrorists. You are surviving every day. You are a victim in that environment, but you know, survivors in environments like that are the strongest people I've ever met because every day you are pacifying a domestic terrorist because that's what they are.
Like I said, like your case is, I've heard and I've read a lot of cases of domestic abuse and domestic violence, but nothing on the scale. I know that women have been murdered as well, but like this, for a survivor, your story is just absolutely up there. I mean, like I said, the impact emotionally, psychologically, physically as well through them 18 years, and then obviously once the abuse ends, CPTSD or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, hypervigilant, PTSD, psychosis, all these different things that come from that. And there's more things being made illegal. I mean, I know they've got like coercive control and behavior and things like that. But just 18 years. So how often was you, and I don't mean to, again with the question, but how often was you hospitalized?
I was never hospitalized because, you know, if somebody Darren's size had punched me, you know, I'd been, you know, proper knocked out. What Darren would do, it would be slide punches to the back of the head. His favorite was to grab my face like this. And I'd always have these little bruises down my jaw from his hands and his fingers. And another thing he used to love doing, because I used to say to him, God, I had like a box of crisps, because he was a big guy, you know, and, you know, a big frigging head, and he'd have a big nose, and he'd come straight into my face and almost peck me like a bird with his nose. He'd chuck things at me, spit in my face. That was one of his favorites as well, spitting in my face. You know, hot food thrown at me, but he never physically punched me full force. You know, he punched me in the back of the head as jabs. Like you jab a punch bag, but you know, if somebody his size with his strength, and I mean, I've seen him knock big men out clean cold. You know, he would have killed me, you know, with a punch.
But he knew, punch you on the back of the head where you've got loads of hair, no bruising. Yeah, it was that sort of thingy. But so as much as he lost his temper, and he probably claimed the old red mist, the old cliche of the red mist, oh, I lost control. But you must have been walking on eggshells in everything he was doing.
It was awful because, you know, you go to work and then you think, oh, what sort of mood is he going to be in when he comes home? And you so soon know what mood he was in, because the front door would open and he would just chuck his gym bag through the door, through the front door into the porch bit, and then through to the living room. So you'd know, you know, what sort of mood he was in by that. But you know, the only nice time I ever had was when he was in the gym training, and then he'd go off gallivanting, doing whatever he was doing, and he'd be gone for hours, which was great. And on a Sunday, when he'd go out with the dogs, he'd be out like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he'd come back 11 o'clock at night. And that was the best time. And like I said, and the best time was when he was in prison.
How many times during that 18 years was he in that prison? It sounds like he went on quite a tour.
He hated prison. He only went twice. He went once for theft from an employer, because he was stealing a load of contraband cigarettes off his load. And while the police come searching for that, they found his arsenal of weapons. And again, if you Google Darren Williams arsenal of weapons, up. And I think he had something like, he only had 4.5 months for the firearms, because the law had just changed, and the barrister who represented him said, you know, I need to let the judge know the law's changed against the gun law. And Darren's solicitors at the time said, you frigging won't be telling him that. And he never. So that's why he only had 4 months. And he absolutely hated prison, hated it, even though he was the daddy, you know, everybody was frightened of him, you know, he didn't have to do anything, you know, but he hated prison. And I think it was the fact that, one, his freedom was taken away from him, and two, he wasn't home to control me and to see what I was up to, because in his head, I am now shagging everybody in the community.
And that is one thing that, having been in prison myself, when I first went to Strangeways and I was on remand on an intimidation charge, that the paranoia that's brought on by a prison sentence is, if you thought it was bad before, like, oh my God, like, I'm insecure as a person, but like, I was accused of sleeping with my friends, her friends, my co-defendant's brother-in-law, the dog. I was my brain was just, and it's heightened massively. And for a controlling person that he was, obviously, that when that element of control is taken away from him, and because the one thing he wanted to control was you, because like you said, anything you went or where, whatever, you couldn't control what he was wearing, where he was going, who he was talking to. You didn't have that control. And it's like, you was obviously, I think you said before, you travelled to prisons up and down from, like you said, to Oos, up in, is it Pencoid?
Pencoid, yeah, and up to Bicester, yeah.
What was the other prisons he was in? So what was the other charge that he got sent down for the other sentence?
He went to prison. He had 9 months, I think it was, for the theft, and then he had the firearms one.
All the weapons were found on top of that, so yeah. Right. And then like, because this is the thing as well, like, this guy did he fancy martial arts, or was it just weapons? Because I know that he used to, like I said, you went on holiday and he'd take you to countries specifically, and he'd want to go to weapon shops and mass, and like I said, like a deadly arsenal of weapons.
Yeah, you know, we went to Poland because apparently it was easy to, you know, obviously he was very into history and he wanted to go to Auschwitz, which we done, but he looked up to see where he could buy weapons from easy without, you know, and get them back into the country. So we went to Krakow, and obviously he smuggled in a couple of stun guns, CS gas. He already had a 22 pistol, and he already had a humane boat killer. Flick knives he would buy, telescopic truncheons. Yeah, you know, whatever he could get his hands on. Oh, knuckle dusters, whatever he could get his hands on, he would bring back. And then also it'd have to be a steroid run.
It sounded like he could commit violent crime to anybody, including yourself, with near impunity, because people wouldn't speak to the police on him because obviously of who he was as a person. I mean, this is, because for those that don't know, for the geography, so this is Newport, obviously in South Wales, and it's like, well, when you think about gangsters, you think Manchester, Birmingham, London, Cardiff, Newcastle, them sorts of places. You don't think of Newport as sort of a hub, but this guy was just, like I said, who could really go up against this guy, as big as he was? Yeah. 18 stone up to 22 stone, 60-inch chest, 6'7", he's literally a man mountain. And like I say, how tall are you, Rachel? And because you were quite petite, 5'8", quite petite, and you were just so so. What was like? How did it progress to this stage where it just got fucking just stupid? Like the life or death situation for yourself.
So I think for me, I think the older I was getting, Cody, I was just like, is this going to be my life now? You know, is this what it's going to be now? And I think I just was really sort of thinking about my life and where it was going and everything, and, you know, fantasizing about, you know, getting out of it. And I remember me and him went on holiday with friends to Tenerife, and he kicked off over there. And I was thinking, you know, led on the beach, crying, thinking, I've got to retire with this guy. You know, it's bad enough now working and coming home to him, but imagine being in the house with him 24/7. So that was my thoughts going on then. I think it was in the June. In the July, we had a massive row, which resulted in him strangling me, and it was only when the kids come running down the stairs, because they said they thought they could hear a pig squealing downstairs, and it was me, and he was strangling me downstairs, and Josh come down doing a silent 999 call, and Jack had a baseball bat, and at that point then he let me go, and I remember gasping for air, and in a moment of madness I leapt up, and as I did, I just pounded the top of his head as hard as I could, and was just like gasping. And then the kids went back upstairs then to their bedrooms, and then Dan started pulling me up the stairs by my wrists, and I'm trying to not make any scene now because the kids are both in their bedrooms. Well, they weren't kids. Josh was 20 and Jack was 16, and he started pulling me into our bedroom, and I just knew he was going to his drawer to get his knives, and I just knew that because down then he'd done something really bad, so now he needed to play the victim. So what he was going to get was a knife out of his drawer. So, and I was like, you ain't. And I managed to break free as he was opening his top bedside drawer. And with that, Jack came out the bedroom. He said, what's going on? And I said, go on, cut your wrist in front of your 16-year-old son, thinking I'm going to shame him. By the time I got down the stairs then, he did. And Jack shouted out, no, Mummy's done it. And then I thought to myself, shit, if he can do this in front of his son, his 16-year-old son, what else is he capable of doing? And then my fears of staying with him became greater than the fear of leaving him. And that's when I thought, right, I've got to get out of this. And I set the ball rolling, you know. He went and stayed up his sister's for, he was into his second week. And then Jack said to me, Mum, Dad's coming back. He said he's going to play mind games with you and make you love him again. And that was Jack's words. And I moved out, went and stayed with a friend. And still now, I'm sort of thinking to myself, I'm in control because it's the honeymoon period. He's trying to win me back. He's trying to get the rules of his game back in control now. He's playing the persuader, you know, sending me the text, I love you, you know, I can't live without you, the persuader tactics, playing on my heartstrings again, as he did over the years. And at that point, I thought, I've got to do something drastic here now, because otherwise I'm going to fall back into it again. And then I remember going to the solicitors, file for divorce, and set the ball rolling like that. And I was bricking it because I knew that this wasn't going to be an easy process.
And this is the thing. And then it's like, because I remember before, I think there was there a situation where you left some money on a plane or something and completely lost his cool? Again, this was obviously pre to this. I was like, this guy would just anything, and he just overreacts at the smallest fucking thing. And then, like I said, how did you serve him when it came to the divorce thing? How did you play out? Because you knew that you was like, wow.
Yeah. So for him now, he was losing his grip. So he'd be phoning me all the time, crying down the phone, leaving me messages, and I used to and texts, and I say to my sister, I can't even understand what that means. And I think he used to take so many diazepam and Zopiclone, and he'd be sending me these random messages. But because he knew he'd done something really bad, he knew then that, you know, he had a more of a period of a time scale in his head. He would have thought to himself, right, so, you know, we'll give her a couple of weeks. I'll slowly sort of break her down, and then she's going to come back. And then when I filed for divorce, then obviously in his head, and it was all ramped up. He's losing control of what's going on. And he was like sending all these messages. Then I knew then I had to make a statement to the police, because all I wanted was for him to leave me alone.
Yeah.
Just let's get divorced. Have the frigging house if you want the house. I'll go with the clothes on my back. But I've got to get from this guy. And I did. And I think that's then was when it started to go downhill. When I went to the police, I gave a historical statement. It was about 18 pages long. He was making threats then to kill me. And then they arrested him. They charged him with common assault for the strangulation. Hence one of my petitions around non-fatal strangulation. And he was due in court on October I think it was the 24th. So this is obviously going back in 2011. Yeah, and then obviously he realised then that, you know, things were really going downhill for him, and he totally lost his grip.
Because it was all, again, that control thing. That's what he wanted, that control. And once, like you said, you took it out of his hands, and like you said, it was literally like, it's going to end up. Every time he lost the plot, you must have thought, he's going to kill me. He's got it in him, because you knew this. Like I said, he could have snapped your neck like that. He was that big a guy, and it's just like so. And then with the salon and with it, well, how did he get access to this shotgun, this sawn-off shotgun?
Well, we know that it came from a burglary in a house, but that's all we know at the moment. And like I said, that was nine years ago, so it was an illegal firearm. And do you want me to run through what happened?
If you're okay,
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So Darren had gone to court on the 12th, I think it was, of August. Then he appealed his bail restrictions, because he had bail restrictions on him, which couldn't come within a 3-mile radius of the marital home. He was on a 6 till 6 curfew, and he couldn't contact either of the boys because they were potential witnesses. So that was the 12th of August. The 18th of August, he'd gone back to court to have his bail restrictions lifted, which the lay magistrates lifted, unbelievably. They lifted the bail restrictions, and the only thing that was in place was he couldn't come into the drive of the estate where we lived. It was one way in and one way out. He could sit at the mouth of the drive, but he couldn't actually come in the drive. So if I was coming in or coming out, he's going to see me. So that was on the Thursday. The police rang me and said his bail restrictions have been lifted. We want to come up and put a panic room in your house. And I was like, panic room? And they said, yeah, we're going to send up it was called the local Bobby van scheme then. So they come up, these 2 guys, loads of plywood. So they start now turning my bedroom into a panic room. So they're double skinning my bedroom door. They put 2 huge metal pieces either side on the wall, and put this metal bar on there. So now I'm going to bed now in a panic room with a great big metal bar at the back of my bedroom door, in case he breaks any bail restrictions which were left in place. So that was the Thursday. I moved back into the house. They done all that. Friday, I went to work. I was covering a colleague's day off. Shouldn't have even been working there. And just finished the lady's hair about 20 past 2 in the afternoon. And with that, it was a beautiful sunny day. And I can remember seeing something obscuring the sunlight, blocking the sunlight out of the shop. And as I looked to the door to see what was blocking the sunlight out, in the doorway was Darren. And at that point, I could see him pushing the door open. And as I'm looking, he's doing this, pulling something out of a bag. And as I look, it's a sawn-off shotgun. That point then, I don't even know why I done it, but I ran towards him, started grappling with him with the gun. Obviously not much of a match, but you know, what do you do in those situations? You know, fight, flight, freeze, or friend. And obviously being quite gutsy anyway, I ran towards him, fighting with him for the gun. He hit me with the butt of the gun. I remember falling on the floor. The reception desk was over. There was an old lady, Connie, who was 92. She was on the floor because this is a busy salon there on a Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
Little old lady sat under the end of the dryers, you know, people running fleeing out of the shop. And then I can remember the phone being on the floor because the reception desk had gone over, and the phone being on the floor. And I can remember tapping the receiver, thinking it zoned out because the receiver had gone off. And really so weak, trying to press 999. Then the next thing, then I looked and I could see him there, just stood there over me. And he just pointed the gun at my chest, and I just pulled my knees up under my chin, thankfully, and he fired. I can remember smelling gunpowder. My left leg flopped to the floor because that took the first blast. And then all of a sudden I felt a massive blast to the side of my head. And I looked down at my leg, and there was a huge hole in my jeans with all this liquid. It wasn't blood. It was like an orange liquid coming out. And I thought, my God, you've shot me. You've actually shot me. And then the gun was put down to the side of me, to the left of me, and I grabbed the gun. And I must have had some sort of supernatural strength because he could not get the gun off me. And there's a picture floating around on media somewhere because I can't find my watch. But I had a watch on that day, and every direction of that watch face is scratched. So obviously we were doing this motion, trying to get the gun off me, and then the next thing, he booted me under the chin. He stamped all over my head. I had 4 of his fingers as bruises in my back. I had his boot mark all up my arm. My left ear had to be slit 7 times. It was like a cauliflower ear. I had black eyes for 6 weeks. I had a lump on my head from where he hit me with the butt of the gun. And the copper said, in 25 years service, I've never seen anything like that in my life. And that sort of like traveled down and ended up as a bruise on my collarbone. But after him battering me, then the next thing, then he was gone. He just disappeared. And then I was rushed to the hospital.
Am I okay to post the? I've got like 4 pictures. One of you in the hospital. I'm asking permission for to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So this one is. So how soon after the incident was this?
This was probably a couple of days after.
You look like your cheekbone. You look like your cheekbone's gone completely fractured. Obviously, he's a.
Do you know what, Cody? I must have had like a breeze block because I never even had chipped off.
Wow, unbelievable! I swear to God. And then. This one, you look pinned here. Hold on. Oh, pinned. Your leg looks completely pinned.
Yeah, so my left leg, so from my knee was totally gone. All it was salvaged was my knee cap. And the surgeon said it reminded him, and he had to look through the textbooks before he done the operations. He said it was like when the IRA used to blow the back of the knees out. So that's what they looked, because they wanted to repair my leg, because the first hospital wanted to amputate above the knee, which I told them absolutely no way. So from the bottom, the base of your kneecap, probably 3/4 of the way down my shin, that was dust. There was no bone left at all. And I only had 40% patella tendon remaining, hence why they put the frame on, to hold what was left in place until they ordered the parts from America to come in and add the operation the following week, a week later.
So are you part prosthetic?
No, still got my leg. The one surgeon wanted to take it off, and I actually told him, as I was high as a kite on morphine, you ain't turning me into Heather Mills yet. And I was like, no, you ain't taking it off. I said, you've got to try. And they transferred me then to Swansea, who done an absolute marvellous job, because they deal with soldiers, you know, war wounds and stuff. So they knew what to do. Got limited bend in it, but you know, still works fine.
And then again, there's 2 more bits. So how long did you spend in hospital, surgery, all that stuff?
6 weeks. So I went into hospital, obviously, the day of the shooting, and I came out, that was the 19th of August, and I came out of hospital on the 23rd of September.
Now, obviously, the police would have obviously launched a manhunt on the back of this, because the thing is, I've only been to South Wales once, and I went to speak to a prison conference in Llanelli. And Wales is, for me, Cardiff, but they're quite small town. They're quite small in comparison to things. So for Newport, this must have sent shockwaves through the community. Obviously, through you, through your family, through your friends, people must have just been like, So on the back of this manhunt that was launched for him, what ended up happening to Darren?
So after the shooting, the police come to the hospital. I had armed guards all around the hospital because they couldn't locate him.
Yeah.
I knew in my heart that he wasn't going to go back to prison, so I knew he'd leg it, you know. And then I had a police officer come into, I think I was on the high dependency ward then, and he came in and he said, we found him. He said, he's dead, and he hung himself. And I cannot tell you the immense euphoria that I felt. It was like, it would be like winning the lottery a million times over. It was incredible because now I was free. That huge heaviness all of a sudden was lifted, and I would be shot 10 times over to keep him dead, you know. And my leg then wasn't a concern. It was just like, do you know what? Whatever happens, I'm free. I'm free now. Whatever happens now, I'm free.
Wow. So have you, I'm going to ask, it's quite a morbid question. Have you been to the spot where he was found hanging?
No. Only because I don't really know where it is. And to be honest with you, yeah, there's no need to go there, you know. And believe it or not, I have forgiven him for what he's done, because I say bitterness is like a bottle of poison, and you're drinking this bottle of poison and you want it to affect other people, but the only person it's going to affect is you. And I think bitterness can really destroy you as a person. So, you know, I've forgiven him for what he's done.
So where did he flee? So he fled to some like woodland or something in sort of
literally not far from the house where we were living at the time. Literally 2 miles up the road, if that. Yes, we just went. Obviously, that would have been all planned, ready for him. You know, to go off and do that, and he would have had a plan B in case that rope wouldn't have held his weight. He would have had another plan B somewhere.
Probably would have taken it, and just like, oh my God. And then, so you was in hospital for how long? 6 weeks, I think you said?
More or less 6 weeks, yeah.
And then a couple of days after you come out of hospital, Jack, if you don't mind talking, if you don't want to talk about it, sweetheart.
No, that's fine.
So through just 6 weeks and 3 days later, obviously, so you've been in hospital, you leave hospital after a few days, and then what happened to Jack? If you don't,
So
you don't mind me asking.
Communication between me and Jack really broke down. Jack had gone to his paternal family for sympathy for his father's death, which you know, understandably, he couldn't fully get from my family. And he was in a toxic environment. He was used as a vessel to channel their anger towards me. And basically, I came out of hospital on the Friday, not seen Jack since the day of the shooting. And I had a phone call on the Monday and said that Jack had gone missing from where he was staying with his paternal family. So I'd gone out with my sister trying to locate him. Then I had a call then around tea time to say that he'd been found dead. He'd hung himself. And this is, you know, my tragedy. Jack is the tragedy in my case. And, you know, all because of one man's actions, you know, this is the massive impact that it's had on us as a family, you know, and there's other families, you know, suffered in the same way.
Kim, honestly, like, just. So you're recovering, and then, like you said, this whole thing, and like, obviously his father's side were obviously in his ear and everything, like, all kind of probably painting you out to be the wicked witch of the West, or it was all your fault, and all these things could have been avoided and everything. At the end of the day, the facts are the guy was just an out and out fucking bully. And like I said, but that day, like you said, the relief of the finding out that Darren had committed suicide, but then to come out of hospital, so you was literally at home recovering. Oh no, you was out and about looking for him, albeit like your legs like messed up. You're trying to find your son, and then you just get that. Was you out in the car and you got the phone call, or was it just like did he come to your door or?
Yeah, it was literally, I had a phone call to say that that somebody from one of Jack's best friend's mum, and you know, she was out looking for him as well, and she said it don't look good. She said that somebody's just come running out of the woods screaming, And I just knew then, Cody, I knew he'd gone. I just felt it in my spirit that he'd gone. Yeah, and it's like, you know, and it wasn't just that either. You know, the losing Jack was awful. But his funeral, you know, and I share this in my book I've written, you know, what they done at Jack's funeral. I mean, even the lowest of the low of the scummiest people would never have done what they done at Jack's funeral. They absolutely destroyed his funeral. I was called a slag. I was spat on in my wheelchair. It was so bad at the crematorium that I had to leave him there. The vicar was called an effing prick. He tried to change the service to another day the following week, but he couldn't because it was chock-a-block. So I had to leave. We had to abandon the funeral and leave Jack there, and with Darren's family, and then we just went back to the wake, and we were just, like I said, you know, there was so much more that I couldn't put in the book. I could only put in the book which I could factually back up. But you know, there's much more to this than what I've shared in the book and what I could share legally. But yeah, you know, I've sort of internalized the grief, I suppose, because I didn't have that grieving process, and certainly not at the funeral. He couldn't give the boy the best send off that he should have had. You know, he was an innocent victim in all this because of Darren's actions. But yeah, you know, like I said, you can't hang on to bitterness because it'll destroy you.
You couldn't even see. So was he buried or was he cremated?
Cremated, yeah.
Jack was cremated. So you couldn't even see him get cremated because of the animosity. And then you got onto the wake. Did you have two separate wakes, or you literally had like one wake?
There was, yeah. So obviously I had my own wake. And Darren's mother and father apparently had their separate wakes because they couldn't even be in the same room as each other. You know, we had a police outside the wake as well. In anticipation for trouble. It was horrendous, Cody. It was horrendous. Like I said, you know, and I've been in Darren's world, you know, for 18 years. And like I said, you can imagine what sort of guy he was, what the circle of people he mixed with. And, you know, to do that to a 6-year-old boy's funeral, what happened at that funeral was horrendous. And, you know, like I said, with the most hardness of criminals probably would never have acted that way.
No, there's certain old school things that you just apply when it comes to funerals and stuff like that. And like I say, I know emotions are going to be running high. On the back of the shooting, you've been in hospital, coming out of hospital. Jack, sadly and tragically, God bless him, may rest in peace, taking his own life. The media attention as well must have been outside your address. They must have, like, local, national, literally wanting to get your story, get that bloody exclusive and all those things as well, whilst you're going through the psychological, physical, emotional effects of the shooting, to finding out the relief of him. Darren took his own life, may he burn in hell, to then Jack's passing as well. God bless Jack, may rest in peace. Your emotions must have been so fucking just. How did you get through that time? Because
well, it was funny because when I was in hospital, I remember this guy come in to see me, and he knocked on the door, and he was a mental health nurse, and his name was Ron, and he knocked the door, and he said hello, and I was like, hello, all right. Obviously this is before Jack died, and he said, I just can I come and talk to you? I said, yeah, of course. So anyway, he pulls a chair up, and he said, they're a little bit worried about you. He said, because you're euphoric. And I went, oh, okay. And I said, he said, yeah, they think you could have bipolar. And I went, excuse me? I said, well, let me stop you a minute now, Ron. I goes, wouldn't you be fucking euphoric if the guy you lived with for 18 years who tried to kill you is now dead? And you could see this huge light bulb going off in this guy's head. And he said, oh, yeah. And then we had a conversation about mental health, and obviously Darren had mental health issues to a certain degree, anxiety, depression, and had a breakdown before I was with him. So everything he came to talk to me about, I actually talked to him about. And I said, listen, I said, I'm euphoric and bouncing around literally in the bed like Tigger. I said, because I'm free. I'm a free person now. And then all of a sudden the penny dropped. But after the funeral and all that, Cody, and whatever else, you just sort of go on autopilot, and you just live each day as it comes. And there was something happening every day. If it wasn't a journalist contacting me, it was the police about something. They were doing an IPCC report, as it was known then. I had to do interviews for a serious case review. Plus, I was being taunted by his family, and there was criminal activities going on. I was having death threats to the house. You name it. It was shit was happening everywhere. But I thought to myself, do you know what? And I can remember saying to the police officer, I said, you go back and tell them lot, I never lived with a nutter for 18 years and learned nothing. They're pussy feeding me. And if they think they're going to break me, they got another thing coming. I said, because I will never be broken. I said, Darren never broke me. I said, and them lot of assholes won't break me. I said, so go and give that back to him. So this was going on for a long time, and in the end then the police built up a big enough case. I got an injunction on one of the family members who kept taunting me and trolling me on my media platforms, trying to put the message out about domestic abuse. This is people I'd never even met. You all had an opinion on my life, and all victim blaming and saying, oh, well, she done this, she done that, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, let's get back down to the nitty gritty. Right. Yeah. And as you read in my book, and I won't go into it because we will be here all night, yeah. But I did go, after leaving Darren, I did go on a night out and meet somebody and have a one night stand. Always been very open about that. Yeah. All of a sudden then it turned around that I was having an affair for 3 or 4 years with this guy, which is absolute bullshit. But then I said, well, hang on a minute, you're all forgetting, because I found out, and I can remember in hospital, one of my sisters coming up and saying, Rachel, if Darren got another child. And I goes, what? I goes, no. And I said, why do you say that? She said, oh, something I've just seen somewhere. Anyway, it transpires that Darren actually fathered a son that was younger than Jack, that nobody knew nothing about, and has got the same name as my oldest boy.
Well, again, it's one rule for one and one rule for another.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think like I said, the fact you went out and had a one night stand and everything, to be honest with you, I don't think anyone would begrudge you that. At the end of the day, someone that comes along and gives you a little bit of a positive interaction, you're going to grab hold of it with both hands, because you're not used to that sort of like thing and stuff. And like I said, but it's from what you've said, it sounds like his family have blamed you for the suicide of Darren. Also Jack.
Yeah.
But this guy, did they just completely turn a blind eye to the 18 years of the worst domestic abuse on every level? Like I said, coercive control, behavior, paranoia, jealousy, possessiveness, all these things, the violence, the threats, the intimidation, all that seems to just be like, well, we'll just sweep that under the carpet because it's convenient for their narrative. And just absolutely mental. Can I just say as well, just while it's on the screen, just plug the book for me, please, Rachel, just so I know it's been out a while.
It's The Devil at Home, and at the moment it's a bestseller in the in categories of domestic abuse and sexual violence and something else. Obviously, thanks to Judge Rinder this week, plugging it as well. But the foreword's written by Michael Sheen, who's a great advocate of domestic abuse, real powerful foreword. And as he says, domestic abuse is not somebody else's problem, it's society's problem. It's all our business, and we owe it to the next generations to stamp it out. So at the moment it's I think it's a little bit of a delay on Amazon, but obviously you can get it from other places as well and get it on your Kindle. But yeah, that's the book. And it sold, the first year it came out, it sold 37,000 copies, and lots of professionals have read it and said it's given them a better understanding and insight to domestic abuse and violence, and why victims don't just leave.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I was wrestling with myself early, because I'm not a journalist in any which way. Like I said, I'm a thick, uneducated street kid. That's been through the system and everything, through the prison system, to my shame and to my detriment. I do it differently now. But like, that was the one thing I was wrestling with myself. I thought, because it's not, I wouldn't have asked it for my own opinion because, like I said, I've spoken to a lot of people that have been through it, but sort of that devil's advocate sort of, why did you say? But then when you touched on it, I thought, you know what? Because it sort of, it obviously, from what you said, it obviously irritates you because the fact is, it's a silly bloody question.
Yeah.
This guy, it was just literally like, he's going to kill me. It's literally fear. And initially it was love when that first few instances happened. He's like, oh, I'll save him and excuse it. And like, it's not him and all the other things that come with it. But then obviously what it became, the guy's a 6'7", 18 stone up to 22 stone, man mountain. The police were scared of the geezer. So what, as a 5'8" petite woman that's got one kid with him and one kid from a previous relationship, what chance do you stand in that environment, honestly? For those that don't know, Michael Sheen, just explaining Michael Sheen is, a lot of people will know, a lot of people might not.
Yeah, so Michael Sheen is the Welsh actor. He's been in loads of Hollywood films. He's in The Prodigal Son at the moment. He was in Twilight. He played David Frost, I think it was. In another film, but yeah, just Google Michael Sheen. He's a well-known actor, a lovely guy, and obviously we're both Welsh, which is yeah, we got that pact. But yeah, lovely guy.
So with the book, because he was your forward for the book, who contacted you first about the book offer?
Penguin contacted me, I think, because my case was quite high profile, and obviously chucking myself out in the arena and chopping off about domestic abuse, and saying, the shame lies at the feet of the perpetrator, and stop putting the onus on the victim all the time and survivor to do something about it. Let's put the onus back on the perpetrator. Don't ask her, why don't she leave? Ask, why is he abusing? And they approached me and said, do you fancy doing a book? And I'd already written 47,000 words myself. So I sent that over what I'd done, and they said, we'd love to do a book with you, would you consider it? And that's it. And that came out in 2018.
And again, with the book, it's not about financial gain. It's about
I get 12p a book. I get 12p a book, Cody.
That's what I mean. That was something that I wanted to touch base on, because a lot of people, like, you get those very small number of naysayers that are like, oh, well, it's not about financial gain. It's about educating people. It's about, by telling you what is people always say to me, why do you talk about prison? It's like, well, if you've got knowledge of something, knowledge is power. And if you don't spread that and share that with other people, then what's the point in going through them experiences? The facts are, people will be going through domestic abuse, or will go through domestic abuse, or might be going through domestic abuse. That if they read this book, it might, because when you're involved in it, you can't see the wood for the trees. You know what's happening. But like you said, fear, intimidation. Some people, and I don't know if you're going to agree or disagree with this, there are sadly people that are involved in domestic abuse relationships, and I think there's definitely an element of fear, 1,000%. But there's also people out there that sadly can't be on their own, and they stay for that sort of reason. So they've got someone to call their own. But
trauma bonding it is. It's trauma bonding, because that perpetrator is abusing you, but then it's the only person you're getting your affection from. Yeah. So you've got that trauma bonding, and it's just it's such a head fuck, really. That's the only word I can say, and these perpetrators are so manipulative. And I deliver a freedom program, 4 groups a week, and since lockdown I've had over 200 women come out on this program. It's a 12-week program, and each week we discuss one of the personas of the dominator, the perpetrator. So you've got your bully, your head worker, the jailer, the persuader, the bad father, the liar, the king of the castle. There's one I can't think of. There's another one, sexual controller. So each week we talk about the tactics they use, how they're reinforced, where he gets his belief system from, how they're reinforced by society, and what sort of beliefs we take on of theirs as well. And when you do courses, certainly the Freedom Program, that absolutely just blew my mind, because when I read her book, Pat Craven, Living with the Dominator, I thought she'd written it about Darren. It was absolutely everything in that book was Darren. And what she done, she was dealing with as a probation officer, these perpetrators of abuse, and they were telling her how they, you know, why they were in and what they were doing and everything. And she said, I had all this information of how they were abusing women, and I had to do something with it. And she wrote the Freedom Program over 20 years ago, and it has saved thousands of lives. And it's like with my book, I give you such an in-depth through the eyes of my journey, and how, you know, how I got to where I am, how I was coerced without even realizing I was coerced. You know, 3 years after the shooting, I was asked to speak at a coercive and controlling conference by Welsh Women's Aid. And I said, absolutely, I'll come and speak, anything to get the message. I said, but I don't know anything about coercion. And the phone went quiet. And I said, hello? And she said, Rachel, she said, didn't you say you couldn't have your hair how you wanted it, you couldn't wear a short skirt, you couldn't go out socializing with your friends, you couldn't cut a man's hair? And I was like, yeah. And they said, that's coercion. I was like, whoa. I said, I was coerced to the hilt. I didn't know what it was. And as soon as I had that word for it, that name for it, then everything just all started clicking into place. And I can remember being in the car with another survivor called Becky O'Brien, and we were coming back from this conference, and I said, Becky, I said, do you ever think to yourself, was it that bad? And bearing in mind, her perpetrator leapt on her in the maternity hospital just after she gave birth to her twins, and this guy's twins as well, and he broke a jaw. And she said, whoa. When I said, do you ever think it's that bad? She said, whoa, do you? I said, yeah. I said, and then I got to remind myself, he came in to kill me. It was attempted murder. He shot me. How much more worse can it get? But that is the grooming process of what these perpetrators do. You know, it's just so blows your mind how, you know, a guy, and talking as a female victim and a male perpetrator, a guy can get in your head so much that you believe that that is normal behavior, and you've got that trauma and that emotional connection with them because they're the person that abuses you and the person that loves you as well.
When you, because you're explaining this now, and it's like, so to people that think it's a black and white thingy, there's a lot that goes behind it. Like you said, the psychological side of things, the control and the mind games and all these things that people are, like the perpetrators are, and like you said, that there's people start doubting themselves and questioning themselves and like, well, maybe it's my fault, and like, but that's all part of the process.
Yeah.
The one thing I've got to address, because I will get someone, a guy or somebody that will say, with domestic abuse, it's not just male to female. There's obviously male to male, female to female, and obviously there are female to male. But I think there's a high percentage that it seems to be predominantly women with male perpetrators. Is that correct?
Yeah. So they say 1 in 3 women get abused and 1 in 6 men. The figures for the men are normally same-sex relationships. You know, don't get me wrong. I have helped men who have had female perpetrators, and that does happen. But what I always say is, you haven't got the same fear. You know, a man can overpower a woman any day, regardless of size. You know, a man can walk away. It's so much harder, and you've got that threat and that fear from being a female victim from a male perpetrator. You know, so much more, and everything's heightened than the other way around. And like I said, you know, that's not dismissing male victims of abuse by a female perpetrator, because I did meet one guy a couple of years back, and I mean, he had to move and basically start his life over because his perpetrator of abuse, a female perpetrator, she was psycho. She was proper psycho, and the family was, and he had to move. And I understand he had probably the same sort of threat and fear that I had. But the majority of male victims by a female perpetrator, you know, they haven't got to stay in that environment. They can just leave more easily than the other way around. And
it's not as easy as people think. It's not just a case of, oh, well, someone raised my hand and then I stay. It's not as people might, the way that it's dressed up to people that I think that have not been through domestic abuse or witnessed domestic abuse, which is, again, witnessing domestic abuse. I know that's another thing that you guys campaign for with your stand up to domestic violence and domestic abuse. Like, people that haven't been through it just seem to think, oh, it's easy. They raise their hand and you just walk out. Like it's so easy, and it's so nonchalant the way they dress you up. And obviously, like I said, if it was that easy, you wouldn't have gone through 18 years of what you've gone through and everything. And What would you say to somebody? What are the and this is quite an open-ended question. What are the danger signs for people to look out for? Whether like it male to male, same sex, male to female, female to male. Because it's not just when we think of domestic abuse, we just think of violence, and that's just one avenue, isn't it?
Yeah. So just think, if you're with somebody, for the bully, for instance, so, the bully use tactics like glare, stare, smash things up, stomp around, sulk, like a big baby. You've got a jailer tactics, somebody that's offering to take you to work all the time and pick you up, somebody that wants to buy you a phone, and track your movements just in case you don't, just in case you don't get home because you're followed for your safety or protection. Somebody wants to install CCTV all around your house, very subtle things, to keep you safe. Then you've got somebody like the king of the castle who will, obviously start, you might start dating somebody and then they'll start, just slowly slipping their way into the house, leaving their clothes over. Oh, can you just chuck that in the washing machine for me? Well, yeah, use the washing machine. Yeah, but I can't use the controls. Then they start getting you to cook and clean and everything else, there's all these different tactics, and I say to anybody, if you really want to look at the tactics, Google the Freedom Program, Google the different personas of the dominator, the bully, the jailer, head worker, the king of the castle, the liar, the sexual controller, the bad father, and the bully. Just Google them all and look at the tactics. Because, and I say to people, if you can't do what you want to do, you can't make your own choices, you can't decide what you want to wear, you can't decide what you want to eat, where you want to work, where you want to go, and you're like, you can't make your own choices, then you're being abused in some way, shape or form. You're being abused because you should be able to make those choices yourself. That's all I can say. If you can't think for yourself and make your own choices, then you're being abused.
And there's also a financial aspect of that as well. And there's so many. See, you've obviously gone through a lot, and you're in, like, would you class yourself as an activist or educator?
Yeah, definitely an activist campaigner. I've got like 5 petitions on my website, www.sutda.standuptodomesticabuse.org, with nearly not far off 1 million signatures now. I meet with Parliament. I've got a phone line to every chief constable in South Wales. In Wales, South Wales, Dyfed Powys, North Wales, and Gwent Police. I've got that direct contact. I've got my contacts to bring cases to them. I'm also a trained qualified IDFA, which is an independent domestic violence advisor, which the police use. So I come into this through the back door, being a survivor with lived experience, but also I'm also a professional as well, but, don't use the professional jargon, because I said I don't want to be a professional in that capacity, because I always want to be on the ground with the ladies at grassroots levels, because that's where I'm getting all the info from, whether there's good practice, bad practice, what their concerns are. I've met Theresa May. I've gone and delivered petitions. My next stop is Boris Johnson. I've met Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, who's a great advocate, and I've got all these different contacts. And it's great because I'm not funded by anybody. I'm not on anybody's payroll. I can challenge and people in power. I can, like the other week, the MP Alex Chalk, I sent in my petition around non-fatal strangulation, making it a specific standalone charge, like New Zealand has, like Australia and certain states in America. I sent my petition to him to look at with a report that myself and Professor J. Monckton Smith have done on non-fatal strangulation. It went to Parliament. Nobody bothered to address it. It got sent to his constituents. Nobody even bothered picking it up from the post office. 3 weeks down the line, it gets delivered back to me. So I went on social media and shamed him. The next thing, then I have an email off him, please resend it. I don't know what happened to it. I can do this. I can challenge those people, and I will. And I think, until domestic abuse is stamped out and it's a minority, then I'm going to carry on. And I think, years and years ago, nobody think about being in a bar. Any decent human being of society would never think, it would be in a bar with somebody and they'd be sinking 5-6 pints and then driving off. You'd think nothing of it. Nowadays, if you've got that conscience, you would be saying to that person, well, hang on a minute, you can't drive, you just sinked 5 pints of lager. absolutely not. Give me the keys. And we need to be doing this as well, looking at domestic abusers through the same lens as sex offenders, you know, because they are vermin at the end of the day. And if they want to change and stop being assholes, then get on a perpetrator program. If you were brought up in that violent household as a child, you know how fearful it was listening to your father beating your mother or whatever. You know, think of what your kids are going to be thinking in that household as well, and the damage it does to these kids growing up in it.
Keep talking, mate. Just let me just close this bloody window. I've done this on the worst possible night with it being bloody bonfire night, and all the idiots are out. Right. So with the what was it called? The program it was referring to, where it identifies the bully
Freedom
and
program.
Is it quite possible that these different like characteristics, if you will, that they can blend into each other? Like the bully could also be one of the other things.
Yeah, they overlap. Yeah. So certain tactics will marry up with like 3 different personas. But it's such an eye opener. It's such a basic 12-week course. The women love it, you know, and we're all on there. And then they'll say something like, "Oh, well, mine used to do this," and somebody else say, "Oh my God, mine used to do that," and I thought it was only me, you know. And you can just see they're all the same. It's almost like they all come out the same factory.
And this, like, with this freedom program, is it, do people have to pay to take part? Is it,
no,
you can...
No, it's free. You can sign up. It's free. If you didn't want to join, like it's all virtual now because of COVID. If you didn't want to join up and come on like a virtual group, you can do it online. Pay £12, and you can just download it and just keep going back and forth as many times as you want. You know, but it's such a brilliant learning and resource because the women come on there. They're validated for everything they've been through because again they think it's their fault, and again after doing the course they see it wasn't their fault. They're validated. They got more awareness, so when they meet somebody else, they can spot the red flags and they're empowered after it as well.
How many people's, I know it's an impossible question to answer, but how many people's lives do you think it's saved? Like thousands, hundreds?
I mean, this has been going for 20 years. This thousands, you know, and I'm like I said, since March, myself being a facilitator, I've had over 200 women come through the Freedom Program. 18 still with their perpetrators. 2 have left already. So yeah, it's a brilliant course.
And is it a thing with this program? Like I said, it's 20 years old, but it sounds like in 60 years, 40 years, the characteristics and the way that like you said, the breakdown of it is the chemical breakdown. It's going to be exactly the same for decades to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what's fascinating? When you do the program and we look at how society reinforces the belief of the perpetrator, you know, and simple things like, and if I had it in front of me, I'd read it to you. There was a Good Wife's Guide, which was put out in the 1950s, because when the war was going on, I mean, all the men went to war, the women were making bombs, they were flying planes, running the school, running the country, basically. The men come back. Well, the women didn't want to go back home and being housewives. They wanted to carry on working. So what the government done was put the propaganda out that there was they done studies on children who were delinquent children, and they said it was called the Lachey study, and they said those children belonged to mums who worked. So that was a way of getting them back into the home. And then they also put out, it was called the Good Wives Guide, and telling you what your duty was as a wife, you know, that you had to make sure that when your husband come home from work, that his needs were greater than yours. Light the fire if it's a cold season. You know, make sure you've got his favourite food on the table. Keep the kids quiet whilst he's there, you know, because he might want to talk, but his needs are far greater than yours. You know, and then they've got a Good Wives Sex Guide as well. You know, honestly, Cody, when you look at it, women did not stand a chance.
Sounds like a chauvinistic sort of misogynistic mentality.
Yeah, patriarchy. And when you look at it then, and you just see how society reinforces it all, it's shocking. And I think, you know, as society, we've got to educate the next generation that it's all about equality, you know, and what healthy relationships look like. And, you know, we know there's no equality, even with like the gendered pay gap for a start, you know. But yeah, you know, women, we didn't stand a chance.
And unfortunately, there's still people that have got that old mentality where you said, like, misogynistic sort of mentality where the women stay at home, they cook the food, and
Yeah.
it's 2020, man. People need to get with the program. So with your campaign that you set up, Stand Up to Domestic Abuse, how did that come about? Where was the brainchild for it? Just
So I think, you know, it was a thing of, right, you stand up to cancer, right, which is very well known.
yeah.
So I went on to Lorraine and Michael Sheen, and I had the white ribbon on, and I said, you know, not a lot of people know what it stands for. I said it's to end violence, male violence against women and girls. And I said, you know, everybody knows what the pink ribbon is, but they don't know what the white ribbon is. I said, but yet, in young girls and women aged 16 to 44, cancer's not the biggest killer, it's domestic violence. And that's a stat, that is. That domestic violence is a bigger killer in young girls and women aged 16 to 44 than cancer. So then I set up Stand Up to Domestic Abuse, because I think we have got to stand up to it, and it come from there. And then I put my conference on last year in Wales, which was Wales's first survivor-led domestic abuse conference for survivors, which you can view on YouTube if you type in Stand Up to Domestic Abuse Conference. Amazing speakers come and spoke at it. There was over 320 delegates turned up. The Victims Commissioner, Dame Vera Baird. I had Police and Crime Commissioners, Chief Constables, Laura Richards, who's an expert on stalking, and she was co-producer of Dirty John on Netflix. If you've not watched that, that's worth a watch. Professor Jane Monkton Smith talking about the 8-stage timeline for homicide, and it's such a great learning tool on there to watch it for any professionals and anybody with an interest in domestic abuse and violence. So yeah, so it started from there. So I'm just waiting now for it to be registered as a charity because of COVID. They've got a bit of a backlog. I've already got my my patrons and my trustees and everything's all lined up. So yeah, so it's just going to get that set up and then really get the ball rolling with everything.
I literally I knew this was going to be eye-opening, but like just massively. And again, for me, it's about raising awareness. And so what would you say? And again, it might sound like a silly question. I don't mean it to. If there's somebody that's watching this that's living in a domestic abuse relationship, what advice would you give them? From
right.
your
I never tell anybody to leave, because a light bulb will go off in your head when you know you're going to leave. You're going to leave. Do it carefully and safely, because you are at greater risk when you leave a relationship. So get the plans in place. You know, I had a lady on my program who'd left after 20 odd years with her 2 kids, planned it meticulously, got the police involved. You know, just make sure you do it carefully. There's domestic abuse services that you can reach out to. They'll help you. There's a national domestic abuse helpline number as well. You can ring. Contact me through my website, www.sutdad.org. I can put you in touch with a domestic abuse service in your area. Remember, it's not your fault. The shame always lies at the feet of the perpetrator. And there is life after domestic abuse, because at the moment, if you're living in that environment, you're not living, you're existing. And like I said, there is life. And mine was tragic, yeah. And it was, I didn't have the normal run-of-the-mill perpetrator. I did have Psycho Bill. So mine was high, a toxic, high risk perpetrator, and I was a high risk victim. So not all cases going to end as tragic as mine did. So don't think that's how they're all going to end. There is help out there. The police will come if you phone 999. If you can't speak on the phone, don't forget you've got the silent solution system as well, where you will be asked by the operator if you can speak to do 55, and they will alert then the police or whoever that there's assistance needed in that household. But it's got to be done off a mobile that has previously rung the police, so they've got a log of that where the address is, or do it off a landline, which they can easily trace. But the services are still working during COVID. Police are still coming to those 999 calls. Like I said, don't suffer in silence, because there is life after domestic abuse. You don't deserve it, and at the end of the day, there's better for you.
So just you know, with going back to Darren just for a moment, is there any sort of, do you obviously Darren was the perpetrator and he was wholly to blame. But do you believe there was any failings from the police in referring you, or like obviously him not being remanded into custody, for example, which could have avoided this whole thing? Well,
Cody, listen, mate, we could be here till 11 o'clock tonight if I told about the failings in my case. You know,
yeah.
36 police officers dealt with my case in 6 weeks. So you can imagine what got lost, dropped, missed, never got followed through. It was horrendous. Jack was failed by social services. I phoned social services from my hospital bed and said, you've got to remove him from where he's staying. I said, because he's becoming a boy I no longer recognise. And me and Jack were like that. And even Darren used to say the umbilical cord is not being cut, you know. Jack was like my shadow. And I said, you've got to remove him. They said he's 16, he can live where he wants. But yet, in the eyes of the law, he's still classed as a child. And he would still have to have an adult. If he got arrested, he'd have to have an adult with him. You know, he's still classed as a child, not an adult till he's 18. But yet, I was told he could live where he wants to live. There was failings right the way throughout my case. And that's why I'm working with those services who failed us miserably as a family, because I don't want to see another family go through it. And, you know, and the more that help and awareness and training I can give people, sharing my story. I love being interviewed because, you know, and I say to people, just ask me anything, because the more that's out there, people will understand better and they'll have more tools to be able to deal with perpetrators and victims of domestic abuse and violence.
So what's your relationship like with your other son, and how's he doing? And
oh, well, I must have done something right, Cody, because he's only literally just moved out. He's 30 in February, so he's just literally moved out. But yeah, me and Josh, obviously one Darren's, which is great, so there's no connection with any of that family or anything. He's very much like me. He's quite robust, you know, and we both, you know, said about Jack, he was a strong-willed boy. We got to just accept what he done. It was a choice he made when he wasn't in his right mind. You know, and even Josh and Jack had fallen out at that point. And, you know, and I have got a strong Christian faith now, which helps me. And I do believe one day I'll see him again, you know, in heaven. And that's how I just get on. And I just think I don't want to be bumbling along in life thinking, you know, once you die, you die. You know, for those that don't believe that there is a God and Jesus did walk the earth, that's fine. But, you know, I got nothing to lose by thinking that. And, you know, if it helps me on my journey to think that I will see Jack again one day, then so be it. And, you know, and I've seen miracles happen in my life. I'm a walking miracle. You know, Darren could have killed me that day. He was familiar with guns. The second shot skimmed past my head. You know, and I believe that God saved me that day for a reason, because he had a plan and purpose for my life. And that is to share with people about domestic abuse and violence, to say that there is freedom out there, you know, and yeah.
What was been on your other lad? What's been the effect on him psychologically, emotionally? Because obviously, what happened? After, like I said, we're all human beings, and it must have taken some toll. I know on yourself, but obviously your boy as well, or.
Yeah, he's like I said, he's pretty robust, Josh, and you know, he had a good network of friends around him, which is great. And yeah, I think, you know, he's not a drinker or anything. I know he smokes dope, you know, and I say that, you know, I can't do anything about it. Do I condone it? No. But equally, if that's what helps him, you know, so be it. But yeah, you know, we talk about it. He don't bottle anything up. He's got a real good, you know, nice girlfriend, and she's very supportive and everything else. But, you know, it's 9 years on, and time is a healer. And I do say that to people who, you know, who've lost loved ones, that time is a healer. And yeah, and you know, and I left Darren to have a life, and there's no way that I'm not going to have a life. You know, he's done the ultimate. You know, I do blame him for Jack's death. You know, I still forgive him, because I said, that I'm not going to be, you know, bitterness is like a bottle of poison, and the only person it is affecting is the person who's drinking it, even though you want it to kill everybody else off. And it's basically, I'm having the best life ever. I've been to countries I've never ever thought I'd, you know, go to and experience. You know, I'm doing something that I love. I'm helping survivors and victims of domestic abuse and violence. You know, I've spoken to kids about domestic abuse, you know, and planting that seed that, you know, you can get out. And Yeah, and you know, we just get on with life, Cody. And like I said, time is a healer. It's 9 years on. And like I said, my life's not to be defined by one man's actions and what he done to me. You know, just because I had a shit start doesn't mean to say I can't have a fantastic finish, and that's what I'm heading for.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you just said there, well, I'm just going to quickly touch base, if you don't mind, on your current situation, because what I'm trying to move on to is the happily ever after, because, like I said, once you eventually manage to get out of that location, that bad place, that toxic relationship, when that light bulb moment comes, what's life like for you now? You moved on, you met this amazing guy, Mike, and
yeah, life is really good. I mean, I've met Mike. He's total opposite to what Darren was. He is Mr. Right. You know, it was trying for him in the beginning because obviously I had, you know, 18 years of baggage, testing him to see if he did have perpetrator tendencies, which he didn't. And that's something else I want to go into some way down the line, because I think a lot of abused women, you know, for these decent guys that are meeting these women who really, you know, want to be loved and want to give love, but find it hard because they've been so badly hurt and treated. And I say to the women, you know, for every cock and tin foil, there is a knight in shining armor out there. You might have had to have kissed a couple of toads to find your prince, but there are decent guys out there. And you know, life for me, as I have moved on, I have remarried, and life couldn't be better. And I just think, you know, and I say the Lord's restored the years the locusts have eaten, and I've crammed so much into these last 9 years, and it's been amazing.
So we'll just bring it to an end. So the one thing as well I love, obviously touching on your like born again Christian side of things, like even down to your Twitter handle, don't look back in anger. Which again, as a Manchester lad, obviously it was sung by Oasis. It's such a true saying, like you said, you want everyone else to that you're drinking that poison chalice, and you want everyone else around you to, like you said, drop dead. But so the Judge Rinder episode, we're now on Thursday. It went out Tuesday. Was it the second? Or was it yesterday?
The third, yeah. Tuesday the third
sorry.
Went out. So yeah, I think it's still be on the ITV hub to watch. I got a Facebook page called Don't Look Back. There's plenty of stuff on there. And obviously I said, you know, my website, www.sutdad.org. On Twitter is Don't Look Back 198. I couldn't get Don't Look Back in Anger. It wouldn't quite.
Oh, sorry, I know that's what he was getting towards.
Yeah, at Don't Look Back 198. And like I said, you know, at the end of the day, just because you've had a shit start in life doesn't mean to say you can't have a fantastic finish. And like you, Cody, you know, your message, you know, and regardless, you know, and you apologize really, which I think, you know, saying, oh, you ended up in prison, but and, you know, at the end of the day, your test is your testimony. And I think, you know, to be able to do that and share your experience of being in prison, and to say to people, it's not a good life to be going down. It's not a good path. There are other options, and, you know, get your life back on track. And I think, you know, it's for people like us being able to share that message. You know, you just don't know who your story is affecting. So just keep on sharing it.
One last thing before I meant to, right. So I wanted to touch base on two last things, right? I was going to touch on Clare's Law, for those people that might feel that their partner shows a bit of aggression or violence or what towards them. Clare's Law is, again, it's another avenue that women, well, not just women, all sexes can use. And it's about, on the back of this, I think she was a nurse or something, and she was murdered by her partner in Blackpool. Yeah, Claire Woods. So is that something you'd recommend to people if they've got doubts of their partner?
Yeah, you know, and it's funny because I met Claire Woods, his father, last year, Michael Brown, and sadly died not so long ago. And we were having a conversation about Clare's Law, and he said it's been hijacked by bureaucracy. And I believe, and I think that because it's such a hard process, and the police tell me as well, it's like 18 pages of process to go through. And I think by the time somebody's asked for a Clare's Law disclosure, they know anyway that they're in a wrong un. But the option is still there to do it, to get the history of that person you've got worries about. So definitely do a Clare's Law. I think you've just got to ring 101 and ask for a Clare's Law disclosure and go through the process. And it takes a few weeks to come back. And I think it just probably confirms what you already know and perhaps what you don't know. So yeah, definitely use the Clare's Law disclosure. That's what it's there for.
Last thing, are you campaigning on any level to get domestic abuse, regardless of what sex the perpetrator is, to a tougher sentence?
Yeah, absolutely. I want tougher sentences. I want, if you look, like, all my petitions are on my website. Non-fatal strangulation, I think we might have secured that to be an amendment in the domestic abuse bill. We've got quite a few backing of peers and laws. I had a Zoom the other week with about 25 peers, and I think we've got their backing to put it as an amendment on the domestic abuse bill, because I've not spoken to one victim who's not been throttled or strangled by a perpetrator, and normally they don't even disclose it to the police. If they do, it's normally common assault they're charged with. Darren was charged with common assault, which is an absolute joke. Restraining orders not worth the paper they're written on, because then you're asking somebody, a perpetrator who is not a decent member of society, to all of a sudden now to adhere to these restrictions and become a decent member of society. They're not going to do it, and they don't. They stick their fingers up to the system. They're not worth the paper they're written on. So there needs to be something done with those, whether, if you have a breach, you're straight in prison for a month or whatever. And you've got some of these low risk perpetrators who will breach them. They might be businessmen or whatever. They don't want to end up going to prison. So that might be enough to control some of these low risk perpetrators. The other one is about taking domestic abuse seriously in court. And that was on the back of a guy who was in court because he tried to get his wife or partner to drink bleach, and he hit her with a cricket bat. And the judge who was hearing the case, Judge Mansell.
That's here. Judge Mansell resides at Minchell Street Crown Court in Manchester. There's a guy,
interesting.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, there's a Judge John Mansell that resides. He's one of the senior judges now. Very possible there is another Judge Mansell in the UK system, but there is a very notable because he's always in the paper for sending somebody down for something or other. Seems to take it quite lackadaisical when it comes to paedophiles, or suspended sentences and such. But if he was in charge of the sentencing for domestic offence abusers, what sentences would you give? Obviously, it depends on obviously the nature of the offence, I guess. But the non-strangulation thing, would you put that in like a grievous bodily harm sort of?
I think I would, if when you're doing that, you're doing it because of power and control. I can take your life, and the report that I done, what these perpetrators are saying to victims. One lady said on there that he said that you should have give your kids an extra kiss this morning because you're going to die now. I've had women have emptied their bowels, their bladders, in the strangulation where they're being strangled. I would certainly give, a minimum of 5 years for non-fatal strangulation. And the possibility is, probability is, if they haven't been strangled once, this would be a reoccurring violent act which would have been happening anyway, and it probably would have taken the 12th strangulation for somebody to disclose anyway. I was strangled on a regular basis. That definitely 5 years minimum, I would say, because I think it would be a deterrent. I really do. And I mean, it's working in New Zealand and it's working in Australia. I think the UK have got to implement this on the domestic abuse bill. Because
as it stands currently, if you're a 6'4" guy and you attack or assault a 6 foot 18 stone man, then you then go on to assault your partner. Them two offences, even though they're classed as, like you said, common assault, Section 47 assaults, things like that, they shouldn't carry the same sentence, because one's against a big burly bloke, and then one could be against, like say, your partner that might be small in stature. And again, people are going to jump on me and be like, it's not just a male to female thing. I know it's not. I know it goes same sex, female to male perpetrators, but in this instance, guys, we're talking about male to female domestic abuse at the end of the day. But so you are actually actively campaigning for tougher sentences for non-strangulation and domestic abusers in general. Yeah. And these things, what they called, what the words? Petitions. Petitions, couldn't think. They're on your website, which I will put in the description below. I will put the Judge Rinder episode as well below, guys, on ITV Hub. Rachel's book, you can see it on the screen there. Make sure you buy a copy. If you're going through this, it could, like I say, one's woman's story, hopefully, and with the words that she said so passionately and so candidly, will hopefully just. And this freedom program as well, it's something that I think that people that are going through it that might not be able to identify or are doubting it or blaming themselves. If you look at this, I think from what you've said, it will put things into perspective and it might open people's eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if there's any guys watching and they know their behaviour is not what right and they want to stop being assholes, you can go on a freedom program perpetrator program, and just go on the freedom program website, and it's all on there. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, and if there are any perpetrators watching this, you know, your girlfriend is not with you because she loves you, because you've killed all that by doing what you're doing. You know, she's with you out of fear. And that's all. And what the damage, if you've got children in the house, just think about the kids, because they're the ones that's going to be damaged. And what will happen is they'll either go on to be perpetrators themselves, or they'll end up being victims. And if you've got, you know, if you're a perpetrator, how would you feel if that was your mum or your daughter being treated like that by another guy?
You know what? That was such a powerful statement. We'll leave it there. Stay on the line, Rachel. I'm just going to drop it and then I'll just look into it. Thank you so much. Again, guys, I'll put all the links for Rachel's channels down below. Like I said, ITV Hub, The Devil at Home, all these amazing things. Stand Up to Domestic Abuse as well, which again, I'll put in the description below. Rachel, I'll leave the last word to you.
Anybody, if you're being abused, please reach out, because like I said, there is life after domestic abuse.
Right. On that note, guys, I'll leave it there.